I'm Alan Colms. Want to welcome back to our microphones Congressman Ron Paul. Congressman Paul serving Texas's 14th district since 1997. Prior to that, ran for president as a Libertarian Party candidate in 1988 when I first had the opportunity to talk to him. And before that was in Congress, written several books. And now, Dr. Paul, I can't believe it. Why did you announce you're leaving Congress?
Well, it was time to go, and it was time to campaign very hard for the presidency. And I can't campaign for two things at once, even though I tried that last time.
Yeah.
But I wanted to concentrate on that. But I'm also ready to leave the Congress, and I'm going to be working very hard for this next year and a half in keeping this job or doing this job as well as campaigning for the presidency.
Why do you think you've got a better chance this time than last time you ran for president?
Well, it can't be because I have different views. Hopefully I can present them better, but I don't think that's it either. I think it's the fact that the problems in this country have been building up, and the country has reassessed some of the things I've said as far as spending too much and running up these deficits. Even Republicans now are starting to look at my foreign policy, of less intervention. I know you're familiar with that. And so I think because of the crisis that it built, and in the last campaign, I talked about this impending bursting of the housing bubble, and then when it happened, it built up credibility for some of the economic beliefs that I had. So I think that's part of it, but the country is also very scared, and I don't see any easy answer. Before the House, the Financial Services Committee today made the point that we spent $5 trillion, in these last 3 years. The debt went up $5 trillion, and there are no new jobs, and the GDP has essentially stayed the same. So people are wondering what in thunder's going on. The old rules aren't working. But that's not a surprise to me because I didn't expect this to work.
Do you feel a sense of vindication in that some of the things you said 4 years ago are coming to fruition, and some parts of the party seem to be coming around to what you've been talking about?
Well, I think so, but I look at it less personally than that it's a vindication of what I consider correct economic policies, that the economists that I have followed for years predicted the crisis, and now we weren't expecting it to end by using the same policies. So in some ways, it's a vindication of those philosophies and those beliefs. So I don't think we can change our way. I don't think we're going to improve unless we reassess the policies that we as a country have accepted. And it isn't a Democrat-Republican thing because, if Democrats want more spending for domestic welfare spending, and it's called Keynesianism, conservatives want military Keynesianism. They said, if you build more bombers, even if they're World War II bombers, that's good for jobs. That's still malinvestment and still debt. So I think that's all being reassessed. At least the people outside of Washington are demanding something different.
Do you acknowledge you may be still a long shot to get the Republican nomination?
Well, yeah, but I've always been a long shot. When I first ran for Congress and long shot, I didn't think I could stay in by voting the way I did. There were a few votes that I took all by myself, and people said, "What are you doing? You're crazy. You're not going to get reelected." So yeah, I would say that I'm certainly not on the top of the list, but we live in very unusual times, and I sometimes kid about that, and I said, well, that's the risk you take. Once you put your name out there, you could be elected. It is possible, but I also understand exactly what the odds are all about. But when I go out and I see what's happening, and I hear from the college kids, I can get pretty encouraged. There's no doubt about it.
Tell me about where we are in terms of the debt ceiling talks and Mitch McConnell's latest foray, which seems to be, okay, President Obama, you do it. You do it on your watch, and we'll then have the opportunity to veto, or to vote on it, then you can veto it. Does that make any sense?
Makes no sense, and it doesn't make any sense if you think that we should have respect for the Constitution. You can't turn the purse strings over to the president and say, by the way, we'll sort of check on you after you do what you want to do. So no, that doesn't make any sense at all, and I don't think it's been well received for the few people I've talked to. But I have not done any polling, but my sense is that that's not going to go very far. How
do we solve the problem then? How do we get beyond this impasse that we're at right now?
Well, with a great deal of difficulty, at first we have to admit the truth. We have to admit we have to understand how we got here. If we don't understand why we have a business cycle, why we have bubbles, and why they burst, and why you have to have a correction, you can't solve it. And we haven't accepted the idea that you have to have a correction. The correction means you have to declare bankruptcies. Businesses should go out of business. Banks should go bankrupt. And bad debt and the malinvestment has to be liquidated. But if you prop it all up, it'll just perpetuate the problem. When the banks got into all this mess, that's where the biggest bubble was on those derivatives, and they became worthless. But they didn't want the banks to go bankrupt, so they bailed the banks out, bought that, and gave them money that they could buy treasury bills, and they're back in the business making huge amount of money. So the taxpayer ended up owning these things. So that was exactly opposite. They should have been liquidated. Japan did the same thing. We did the same thing in the 30s. So in these last 70, 80 years, we haven't accepted the idea that when things get out of kilter, you're supposed to repair the damage and eliminate the bad debt so you can go back to economic growth.
But do you acknowledge that we need to raise the debt limit, though, in order to pay our bills at this point?
I don't think so. I think, if you were on a fixed income and getting into trouble, you could arrange it so that you pay your bills accordingly and pay the most important one. So if the debt payments are the most important, or Social Security, this idea of scaring people that there won't be any Social Security checks, I think that's just part of the game plan. But no, you could do it with the current cash flow, but you'd have to start cutting things. And of course, right now we keep expanding the expenditures overseas. We're at $1.4 trillion a year, and nobody's. Even the conservatives here don't talk about what I talk about. Like cutting the spending. We don't do any of that. We're going to have a major crisis within 12 to 18 months with a rampant inflation.
Should the Republicans? The president offered $4 trillion in cuts over 10 years. Should the Republicans be a little flexible and say, okay, let's agree to the sunsetting of the Bush tax cuts, which was the original plan?
Well, I wouldn't agree to that, because that to me is a tax hike. But I want to do it with tax cut and quit doing the things that I consider not part of Article 1 and Section 8. But I do have a list of priorities, and I always go back to it should be much easier to cut this stuff overseas.
Right.
Rather than going to child health care. So I would have priorities. But if everybody here understood how serious it was and thought we should, cut back, you could have across-the-board cut, and just say, well, we can't agree when we're going to argue forever and ever. We'll just cut and then pay our bills as we can and go back to work. But right now it's so difficult because the jobs aren't available. The tax system and the monetary system chases capital away. They're afraid to bring their money back home because they'll be taxed. And weak currencies, it goes to stronger currency. That's why it goes east. It goes to China and other places, which is rather ironic. But the jobs follow the capital, and nobody's really seriously considering changes that.
Is there a role for government in creating jobs, and what would that role be?
Well, yes, they have a role, and that is to create an environment where businesses can create jobs. In a technical sense, the government does this program and we're going to create 100 jobs or 1,000 jobs. Not in that manner, but if you have economic policies such as sound money and market interest rates and savings that are reasonable and a proper tax code and a proper regulatory code and a proper foreign policy, that would create a general environment that would create jobs. But the people create the jobs, the business people create the jobs, and they go to the areas that are most efficient. When governments and bureaucrats create the jobs, they go to the wrong places. We created a lot of jobs building houses. People were very happy building houses until they built twice as many as we needed. So they made a miscalculation. So we had good jobs, but now we don't have any jobs. So that's the kind of job creation I don't like.
What do you have to do now to break through in terms of moving toward the Republican nomination in that process? What do you need to do personally to get yourself to the next level and achieve what you are working toward?
Well, the best best thing that could happen in my efforts would be to have the independents come vote for me, because that's where a lot of my strength is.
Yeah.
The Republican base is the hardest place for me to campaign, because they're much more pro-war, and they have some civil liberty issues that I don't agree with, or their lack of civil liberty positions. But no, I have to do well in these early ones. Matter of fact, we're working very hard just on this straw vote in Ames, just to prove that we are a good candidate, and that is a pretty good test. On these straw votes, we do pretty well, because our supporters are very, very determined, and very loyal, and they are very energetic. So Ames lends support. If we do poorly in Ames, I'm not going to be very encouraged at all. It's just a straw vote.
So that's a big test, though, for you. Yeah.
Yeah, for me it is, and we didn't do real well last time, so I certainly have to do significantly better than we did last time.
Any chance another Paul will take a run for your seat? I think Robert lives close to the district and can thinking about a political career.
No, I saw that reported. They've asked him about it. He lives in Dallas. He practices medicine up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and we're down near Houston. So he's not close by, and his heart isn't in it. I think he has an interest because he's in our family, but I don't think he's on the verge of seriously thinking about that.
Dr. Paul, I appreciate your time as always. Thank you so much for talking to us. Hope we can get to do it again soon.
Thank you, Alan.
Thanks very much. That's Ron Paul. We are coming right back at 877-4ALAN, 877-367-2526.